And we are now live.
Fantastic.
We got folks starting to trickle in.
Okay, perfect. So as folks are trickling in, maybe what we'll do is just review a few housekeeping items first. So first of all, I should say welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're so happy to have you here and very excited to talk about the legal assistant position with you. And I said, while we're waiting for folks to trickle in, we'll just look at these few key items first. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is that audio and chat functions have been turned off for the purposes of this webinar. So what we've asked you to do is if you do have any questions, please do submit those through the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen. We will hopefully have time to have an open Q&A session at the end, but we do have a lot of stuff to get through. So if we don't have time today, please do still submit those questions because we'll be creating an FAQ document, which we will be posting to the careers page by the end of the week. So whether you ask it now or later, we will do our best to answer your questions for you. One thing I did want to mention in relation to that as well is confidentiality is important to us, and you will remain anonymous to fellow webinar participants. So if we do open questions at the end, Diana, who I'll introduce in just a second here, will read them out and will not include your name when she's doing that. There's also the option for you to submit questions anonymously through Zoom using that Q&A function, so please do use that if that's more comfortable for you. We have asked you to send questions in advance with the registration. So thank you so much for that. We've got some great questions. Thanks, Diana, for putting those up. So do take a look at those. Those are some of the questions that we'll be reviewing today. And then before we get into the rest of it, I do have to do my usual spiel of this session is being recorded. So it will be available on the careers page as well. So if you're viewing this later because you couldn't join us today, a big welcome to you as well. We're very happy to have you here. And we will do our best to post this one by the end of the week as well to the careers page. Okay, so I guess we'll get into the actual content of the webinar, hey? So my name is Stephanie, and I am working in human resources. I'm a human resources advisor supporting the office. Joining me on the call today is Sarah. She's our general counsel, and Diana, who I've mentioned a few times now, and I'm a big fan of, has very graciously offered to facilitate this session for us. Before we get into the actual content as well, I do want to recognize with gratitude and respect the lands that we're all calling in from today. I don't know where you're calling in from personally. I'm calling in from what we now refer to as the city of Surrey. So that's on the traditional and unceded lands of the Semiahmoo, Katzie, Kwikwetlam, Kwantlen, Kikite, and Tsawwassen First Nations. In addition to that, I also want to recognize the ancestral and continuing connection to this land of the Métis people across the province. So what will we cover today? We're going to talk about the organization. We're going to talk about us being an independent office. We're going to talk about strategic priorities. We're also going to chat about the legal department generally, so department priorities and more about the role specifically, which you're here to learn more about. And then you will jump back to me and I'll talk to you about all of the HR stuff. So what do we offer as an employer? What does our hiring process look like? And what are some tips for as you prepare your application for us? So like I said, if at the end we have time, we'll do some open questions. But for now, I will pass it over to Sarah. Oh, Sarah, I think you're muted. Welcome to Zoom, everybody.
How's that?
That's great.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much. So hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Khan, and I'm General Counsel here with the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. And I'm in Vancouver, which is the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I use the pronouns she and her. And I'm going to give you an overview of our office, what we do, and a bit more details about the legal department. and the role. So first off, the Human Rights Commissioner is Kasari Govender, and she was appointed for a 5-year term last September. Our commissioner is one of a number of independent officers of the legislature and is the first fully independent human rights commissioner in BC. The Human Rights Commissioner's Office has a broad statutory mandate under the Human Rights Code to address systemic discrimination in all areas covered by the code and to promote the prevention of human rights violations more generally in BC through education, research, interventions, inquiries, and monitoring. By setting up the BCOHRC, that's the short form I'll use for our office, and entrenching the Commissioner's powers within the Human Rights Code, the legislature of BC has recognized that multifaceted strategies are necessary to uproot systemic discrimination in order for us to seek systemic solutions to human rights problems in BC. So in essence, our office is tasked with monitoring and acting as a watchdog for human rights in the province. In terms of the structure, we have Commissioner Govender. We also have our Deputy Commissioner, Stephanie Garrett, and then we have 4 directors of our different departments. So we have a Director of Communications, Director of Research and Policy, Director of Education and Engagement, and me as General Counsel, I'm essentially a Director of the Legal Department here at the office. Each of our departments has various staff members. We also have a Manager of Operations. And we're very fortunate to share corporate services with the Representative for Children and Youth, which is another independent office of the legislature. And that's who Stephanie Addis works for. So we share human resources, finance, and information technology staff with the RCY. Each department at our office has staff within it, and we are in the midst of a hiring wave. We anticipate having a core staff of between 25 and 30 people once we're all done with this hiring. At our office, we work as a multidisciplinary team, and we aim to have representation from each of the research and policy, legal, education engagement, and communications teams on each of the major projects that we undertake. We also work with a pretty wide variety of contractors. In the legal department itself, we currently have 2 lawyers, me and our staff lawyer, Heather Hoynes. We are also in the midst of hiring a 3rd lawyer. So hopefully we'll have that person in place soon. We also will be hiring a law co-op student periodically and when our budget allows for this. So we do anticipate having a law co-op student join our office and our department starting in January of 2021 for 4 months. The BCOHRC has adopted the following, pardon me, 5 organizational strategic priorities for the next few years. The first is our foundational ongoing priority, and that's discrimination under the BC Human Rights Code. The second is decolonization. We also have poverty as a cause and effect of discrimination, hate and the rise of white supremacy, and human rights for those detained by the state. Some of the key work that our office has undertaken so far includes setting up the office, of course, and hiring staff because we are a startup. Our office was just started last September. Developing internal policies and procedures, and developing our strategic plans. We've also done a number of other activities such as preparing materials and guidance on the human rights implications of COVID-19. We've also conducted many community engagements that have informed our strategic priority areas. We've conducted regional engagements with the public across the province, and we've prepared a report on disaggregated data collection following a request by Premier Horgan. So as I've talked about, the BCOHRC has a broad statutory mandate, and the legal department is going to play a crucial role in fulfilling the goals and objectives of the office. We'll advance legal work in all of the office's strategic priority areas, as well as monitor and respond to critical and emerging issues. So to do this, the legal team is going to develop and update rules, policies, and guidelines that apply to the work of the legal department, intervene in human rights complaints before the BC Human Rights Tribunal and in other legal proceedings, conduct human rights investigations and inquiries, and assist with preparing reports, provide ongoing legal support to the Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, and the Office's Education and Engagement, Research and Policy, Communications and Operations departments. We're also going to assist the Research and Policy team with complex special program applications and legal reviews of policy and research documents. We'll be assisting the Education and Engagement team with responses to complex requests for information and legal reviews of fact sheets and other educational materials. We'll assist the operations team with contracts, grants, and other similar documents. We'll assist our information and privacy officer with reviews of complex issues that arise under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And we'll assist our corporate shared services staff with legal reviews of various documents, including internal policies, procedures, and templates. Some of the key initiatives that the legal team has underway include developing investigation and inquiry frameworks, investigating cases for potential intervention, investigating ideas for potential inquiries. We've also done some work on systemic discrimination policing. We are conducting legal reviews of educational materials prepared by our Education and Engagement team. And we've also conducted and are in the midst of conducting some legal reviews of policy guidelines prepared by our Research and Policy team. We're also conducting some staff training on legal issues, so training of our own internal staff. The primary duties for the legal assistant role are set out in the job profile, but I just wanted to highlight some of the main duties. So some of these are setting up and coordinating meetings and appointments and making logistical arrangements such as booking and setting up meetings, ensuring that participants have the relevant documents. And when we're able to travel again, booking conferences, meeting rooms, travel, and other accommodations. And I should note that booking and setting up meetings and corresponding with participants in the meetings, that will be with internal staff teams here at the BCOHRC, but also with external parties. We'll also need ongoing support from the legal assistant to do things such as managing the flow of information by screening and prioritizing incoming demands, including through Microsoft Planner and Teams. As we're working remotely, of course, just about all of our meetings are taking place using Teams, Skype for Business, and Zoom. We do rely pretty heavily on Microsoft Planner and Microsoft OneNote for meetings and for project planning, and we will require assistance with these programs in order to manage our projects, meetings, and workload. We will sometimes require the legal assistant to take notes during some meetings and to help create and update Excel spreadsheets periodically. The legal assistant will also assist with managing the legal team's calendar and schedule, both internally and with our other departments. We will require assistance to remind us about some important deadlines. We do have multiple deadline reminder systems, but we will require your assistance, or the person that we hire's assistance with those. Our work, I just want to emphasize that our work requires a very high level of confidentiality, as we're often required to deal with very sensitive and confidential information. So we'll also require assistance with managing our correspondence and document filings, and keeping our folders, our internal folders in good order. The position will also provide daily support to all members of the legal team, including our contractors where appropriate, to deal with requests for information and just generally managing the workflow. Once we start working on inquiries, this position will help us to manage the flow of information from registering participants in our proceedings to assisting with assisting with information requests and making sure that our inquiry pages on our website have the required information. And then, of course, we'll require general assistance with making sure that documents are stored in the appropriate places. I wanted to just give you a brief idea of what a typical work week might look like. So, of course, we're working remotely, so much of our days are spent in meetings or online. Of course, we're in constant touch with each other. I anticipate having 2 scheduled check-ins per week with the legal assistant so that we can review new projects that prioritize work. We'll also be sharing information during these meetings about what we're working on and problem solving. We also anticipate having a weekly legal department staff meeting, but we'll also be dealing with each other on a pretty regular basis using Skype instant messaging and other forms and emails, of course, and just sometimes regular old phone calls. I also wanted to tell you a bit about who will be successful in this role. I really think that a successful candidate here will be comfortable working in a startup environment, and I can't emphasize that enough because we're still very much getting settled. We're still developing our own internal processes and policies. And so, and of course, we're in the midst of, like I said, a big hiring wave. So a lot of new people will be starting with us in the new year. So this position does require someone who's comfortable with working within that framework. Also comfortable dealing with many requests for assistance, because we'll have several people in our legal department, and also an ability to prioritize work in consultation with me and the rest of our legal department. We also require, or we think someone who would be very successful in this role is someone who's comfortable with shifting priorities, working with a large multidisciplinary team, and someone who also has an understanding of the human rights landscape. The legal assistant will have colleagues within the office who are administrative assistants and who can assist with questions. So the person who's hired won't be alone. And I think that's it for me, Stephanie. Perhaps I can pass it back over to you, and you can add some more things. Oh, I just wanted to emphasize though that I hope, I'm taking a fairly clinical approach to dealing with the posting, but I wanted to emphasize that it's a pretty fun place to work. So we have wonderful staff. We have really talented people who are so committed to promoting human rights in BC and reducing and eliminating discrimination. And I think it's really important for you to know that we have a really collegial and talented group of people. So over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. I am unmuted now. Hello, everybody again. It's been a minute since we've last talked. So thank you so much, Sarah, for going over that, the organization and the position itself. Very exciting role, one that we're very happy to have join the team. And so now what I'm going to do is I'll just talk about the hiring process, what you can expect as we go through the process. I'll address a few of the questions that we've received so far. And then, like I said, if we have time at the end, we'll open it up for questions. So first of all, what do we offer as an employer? And the thing that I think about the most when I think about working for this office is that it provides meaningful work. So you'll have the opportunity to work with an independent office of the legislature, and that provides you the ability to contribute to systemic change in the province, which is something that, like I said, is really meaningful and something that I particularly find really valuable in supporting this office, and as Sarah mentioned, the RCY as well. And as Sarah mentioned as well, you're working with a unique, dedicated, diverse, and I really do think fun group of people. And we're constantly learning from each other and growing our knowledge and skills. You know, startup is a unique environment. It's fast paced, it's challenging, it's exciting, and it's really interesting to be involved in an office, you know, right in its early stages. You get to be involved really in those foundational conversations and building an office from the ground up. And that's something that's exciting as well. So we did receive a couple of questions about hours of work. So this position will be 35 hours bi-weekly. So that's 7 hours per day. It's excluded from the union. And yeah, that's pretty much it on hours of work. This posting is going to be based in Vancouver. We did get a question about that, if you could apply from other areas of the province. And the intention is ultimately that it will be based in Vancouver. However, right now, we're obviously working remotely. We're having a Zoom conversation. We're having Zoom interviews later on. And so while we have that opportunity to work remotely for now, like I said, the intention is ultimately, you know, when we have that information from the provincial health officer and the commissioner has deemed that conditions have been met for employees to safely return to the office, the expectation is that this position would be based in Vancouver. Okay, now you're probably wondering, what about vacation? What about benefits? What about all of that stuff? And we do offer that as well. Like I said, this position is excluded from the union, so you will be governed by the terms and conditions for excluded employees, and I'll provide a link to that in the FAQ document that we're developing. We also have some great benefits. They're flexible benefits that include extended medical and dental. Vacation leave, because you are an excluded employee, leave starts at 140 hours or 20 days per year. So that's prorated based on when you start in the year. And that grows over time, which is something that's important to think about. Other than that, we've got other leave, including sick leave, special leave for certain life events, long-term disability. It's all there if you need it. And then the other thing I want to mention as well too is that you'll be contributing to the BC Public Service Pension Plan while you're employed with the office. Okay, hiring process. So the job profile is something I want to talk about as the first thing, because that's really your touchstone throughout this hiring process. If you haven't done so already, I'd suggest you actually download it from the website and have a copy so that you have that with you throughout the entire hiring process. So in the job profile, you'll notice a job requirement heading, and under that heading, you'll see a number of subheadings. So education and experience, preference statements, knowledge, skills, and abilities, etc. The first stage in our hiring process is screening. And when we're screening, we're reviewing applications against those education and experience qualifications outlined in the job profile. And so only those who meet all of those requirements will be able to be screened through or considered for future movement into the next stages. So we can't make assumptions about someone's experience. We have to be able to defend our hiring decisions. So we ask that you really clearly show how, when, and where you meet these qualifications with enough information for us to know that you've gained the experience that we're looking for. If you meet any of the preference statements, I'd reference that too in your application as well. And we'll talk more about preference statements in a second. So let's say you screen through. The next stages will be a written assignment, and then if you pass that, you'll be invited to an interview. And so going back to that job profile again, in the screening stage, we're looking for those education and experience requirements, but in these other stages, we're really looking to dive more deeply into those knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies that are outlined in that job profile. So during COVID and during the pandemic, we're aware now more than ever how many responsibilities everybody is juggling, whether it's home, family, community, it's all kind of coming together right now, and we're really aware of that. So we're trying to build as much time and flexibility into the process as we can. while respecting at the same time that we want to welcome new people in quickly, and we're excited about the work that we're going to do. So we want to make sure we get people in a timely way as well. So an example of that is we've had to change our process a little bit. So we'll be doing virtual interviews instead of having them in person, because safety is really important for us and for the people that we're looking to hire. You will be hearing a lot from us, including status, timelines, if you're screened in, if you're screened out. So please regularly check your email that you've provided to us in your application. And at each stage, you'll notice in our communications that we ask you to reach out if you're facing any barriers or have any difficulties or considerations that prevent you from completing an assignment, doing an interview, or anything else that in the way we've described in those communications to you. So this is going back to my first point about this. If this applies, or if there are any accessibility options that would be helpful to you, please let us know. I want to be really clear that we welcome this and we will take reasonable steps to remove barriers and provide options. And asking this question won't negatively impact your application. I know that's something sometimes people worry about, and that's not something you have to worry about here. The other thing we will do is we'll try to give feedback along the way. So if you're not screened in, like I said, you'll be notified as well. But Sarah referenced that we do have a lot of hiring activity right now. We've just closed 6 other competitions, and we anticipate a lot of applications for this one. So while we are very happy to have these conversations with you, we are a small team, and it might take us some time to get back to you to have these feedback conversations. So we just want to thank you in advance for your patience as we do our best to get back to everybody on that. Okay, how am I doing on time? I've got 3 minutes, so I'm going to fly through this next bit. I did want to mention a little bit about preferences and equity. So as you'll notice in the job posting, we're being pretty intentional about hiring a diverse team with lived experience with human rights. So this is mentioned as a preference statement in the job profile, and it will be considered throughout the hiring process. However, we're aware that it might not feel like a safe thing to do to self-identify in a job application. And we recognize this in addition to the impacts of discrimination. So because of this, we ask for a brief statement only and to the degree you feel comfortable sharing. So if that's one sentence in your cover letter, that's totally fine. One of our guiding principles is to operate in a trauma-informed manner, and thus it's your choice whether to volunteer information or not. We will hold your application in the strictest confidence and we'll share it only with the hiring panel. And I want to mention as well, as it comes to preference statements, wherever you've expressed preference in a job profile, we still welcome applications from everybody. And all applicants will be assessed against the job requirements for the position that I talked about earlier. So all applicants must meet the education, experience, knowledge, skills, abilities, and the requirements for the position in order to proceed through and be the successful candidate. And I only have one more talking piece left, and that's on conflicts of interest. So we like to be transparent about this and bring it out front so that people understand that we do review this with any applicant before hiring. So as the BC Human Rights Commissioner is an independent officer of the legislature with the ability to hold inquiries into a broad range of human rights matters within BC, successful candidates will need to avoid conflicts of interest. So this could mean that successful candidates may not be permitted to sit on boards or engage in other activities that could result in an actual or perceived conflict of interest. So again, just a heads up, this is part of our process. So if you are invited to later stages of the process and we're talking about a job offer, this is a discussion that we will be having, and we want to be upfront about that. I think that's it. Okay, and I'm right at time, so over to you, Diana.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Stephanie. Yeah, so we're at time, but we've got time for a few more questions if you just want to go a little bit over time. Let's start right off the top. Sarah, if you could expand a little bit on the education requirements and what would be considered to meet this qualification, and possibly about whether somebody without direct legal experience would be considered. Oh, you're muted again.
There, good. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna, I'll go through some of the questions, try to respond to some of them. So in terms of a question we had is, what are some of the circumstances that have led to the creation of and recruitment for this role? This role has been planned for quite some time, so we have been planning to recruit for this role. Would the legal assistant be developing any projects regarding human rights in Vancouver? The legal assistant will be working with the legal team on projects involving human rights all across the province, and some of those, of course, will affect Vancouver or be related to things that are happening in Vancouver. In terms of the education requirement, for this role, we've said grade 12 graduation plus courses related to legal assistant services or equivalent. So we are assuming that people would have some courses outside of outside of completing grade 12. Now, we've kept it fairly open, so hopefully you can, or what we'd ask is that you elaborate on what your education the educational background that you have is, and just be really clear about specifying that within your application. Another question that we had was, would someone without direct legal experience but extensive administrative and data entry experience be considered? We're keeping this posting open fairly widely, so what we do ask is that you really emphasize how your experience fits within the requirements for the job. So if you have experience, for example, doing extensive administrative work, well then specify that and talk about how it fits within our job requirements. Another question that we've had relates to travel. We don't anticipate having any that the legal assistant will be required to do any travel until COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. Once they are lifted, we may hold, for example, an inquiry proceeding in different parts of the province, and we may need the legal assistant to travel with us to do this. We don't expect the travel requirements to be extensive, but we do expect that there will be some periodic travel requirements. And then I think there were a few questions in the chat, which I'm going to try to answer. A question was, can you speak to some of the other postings that will be available within our office? All of the other current posting, or the other postings that we've had, my understanding is that the applications have closed for all of those positions, although I'll leave that to Stephanie Addis at the end to clarify. And then how has the BCOHRC's workplace responded to COVID-19? We have, for the most part, been working remotely since COVID restrictions came into place. There may be some opportunities for some staff to work inside one of our offices, but that will be dependent on scheduling with our operations team. But for the most part, we'll supply you with a laptop and computer equipment in order for you to work from home until COVID restrictions are lifted. Diana, are there any other questions that I've neglected to answer?
Nope, that's all the questions that we've had submitted.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll pass it back over to Stephanie Addis. And once again, I just say thank you very much for your interest in this posting and for attending the webinar. And we look forward to receiving your applications.
There we go. This is going to be the webinar of us not figuring out how to mute and unmute ourselves. Regarding the question about some of the other postings that will be available with your office. So Sarah is correct. We did have a very recent hiring wave of 6 separate competitions, and those have since closed. So we're at various stages of those ones as well. At this time, in terms of future positions that may be available, more information to come on that in the new year and how our office is growing and what the needs of the office are. What I will say is that, as Sarah mentioned, we are looking at hiring summer students pretty regularly for the legal team. So if this is kind of your field of interest, keep an eye out for that if you're a student, because those opportunities will be coming up in the coming months. And I guess that's it.
That's about it. Yeah, we don't have any more questions in the Q&A. This webinar has been recording this entire time, so we'll have that posted and the answers to those questions posted as well.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thanks so much, folks.